Hello gang, SharpChat21 here. Hopefully the last video on this section of the truck. It is time to put the brakes on finally. Had a couple small issues in prep. I painted the calipers I had because they were mismatched set. One's Ford factory, one is Napa Gold from 1996 or so. Same with the rotors. The rotors are Napa Golds from 96. So, had some issues with painting on those, but got it taken care of. It is time to start putting things back together. First thing first, because these are taper roller bearings, the bearings need to get packed, so we're going to pack the bearings. I'll show you how to do one, and then I'll do the other four. And then we'll show you how to pack the rotors and get them all mounted up. Last thing we're going to put on is going to be the calipers, though I've already taken them off the truck because I tore the dust seal on one as I was taking it apart to paint. So a little oopsie on my part there. I pulled the dust seal from one of the ones that was on the truck. We're all good because the other one was torn. So let me get reset and we will start to pack some bearings. All right, we are running some Timkens. They are SET 37s is the part number. We do not need the outer race. These come off. The bearings, or the rotors have an outer race pressed in already, so I'm not going to use the one that came with the Timkens. I'm going to use the ones that are pressed in because I don't want to screw the rotors up while I'm driving them out. That being said, we keep the Timken races for when we're done, so we can set this pack bearing in. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. The way I've always done it is press it glob on my hand, and then you just work it in. Now you make sure that you get grease coming out the back and the front side of this. So you got it coming out the back and the front. That bearing is packed. So you got to do that 3 more times because we got 4 bearings to go on these. I'll come back when they're done. All right, bearings are packed. Last thing to do is get some of these seals. This is an SKF 24917 seal. This we will press into this space right here, but first a bearing has to go in. So I'm going to grab a glove and we will put one bearing in, and then we will put the seals in, and then we'll pack with grease again. these are. So pretty straightforward, not super hard to do. Pack the inside with grease, and then it's time to get these things mounted up on the spindles. So we'll come back and we're ready to do that. Okay, so it is time to get the brakes on the spindles. Need a little bit of brake clean. Because we're going to clean off the spindle here. Because I sprayed her down with some WD-40 the other day just to keep the water off. All right. So. It is a little bit of a trick to get them on, but they do slip on fairly easily. And you are going to peel some of the grease you packed in there out. That's okay. That's why we packed it in. But that's all right. Now, since we're putting automatic hubs on, they have a different nut arrangement than what we took off. There's an inner nut with a pin, a locking collar, and then a torque nut. Make sure when you put the inner collar on that the pin is facing the outside. Now this is Powerbilt 4-lug 2 3/8 inch spindle nut. Part number is 648473. This will slip right over. And we're going to hand tight this, and then there's a torque sequence for it. But in addition to the torque sequence, you need to spin this hub as you torque it down. You torque it to 35 inch-pounds. Spin it. Torque it again. you spin it again. Okay. Do this a handful of times. That one basically didn't move. So we're where we need to be. Now, this... When you finish torquing it on, you then have to brake torque. Okay. And then the next one you have to torque to 16 inch-pounds. So I need to go get my inch-pound torque wrench set up, and we'll be right back. Now, this is an inch-pound torque wrench. This is one of two I have. The other one I have starts at 30 inch-pounds. So we're basically not torquing this at all. That's 16, like it's nothing. The balance beam one, you have to be very gentle with. Now that seems a little tight, but I have a sneaking suspicion that is going to loosen up once we drive this a little bit. "16 inch-pounds, if you don't have an inch-pound torque wrench, is basically hand tight. Little lighter than hand tight. Now, next piece is this lock washer. They can go on one of two ways based on how the holes need to line up. That way is not it. That way is. Now this lock washer is really the torque washer. This thing goes on and gets torqued to 150 foot-pounds. Let me grab that one, and we'll get that torqued. So we are on the last torque. This torques to 150 foot-pounds, as I mentioned a minute ago. And that's on. So, last thing to do is to grab the hub and slide that thing on. Now, these hubs specifically say not to pack them with grease. So we're not. We are, however, going to grease the O-ring, and I'm going to grease the threads here where they, the splines where they engage. just going to put a, light coat of grease on. Okay, that slips on. Alright. And I'm just checking to make sure we engage and disengage, and we do. Perfect. Okay. That is on. All right. So I'm going to pull that back off real quick because we need to wipe this all down with some brake clean so we can get the get ready to put this thing on. All right. So that's the hub and brake installation. Well, the rotor installation. Next is the pads. So let me switch out and we'll get those on. So we have driver's side caliper. Now, how do you know it's a driver's side? Because the bleeder sits on top. So if we drop that in like this, then we are where we're supposed to be. Now, we need some brake grease. We're going to use this ceramic. Now there are, on the back, a couple of slide spots for the pads. Now, the other thing we want to do is where we want it. Now this just goes in on a press fit and put it right up against the pad. You got to spray down the fronts of all the pads. Now, I put a little bit of brake grease on the piston and a little bit on the back where this pad lips, because I like to make sure that these will come back off. Make sure you get the notches lined up with the ears. Now there's one more thing to do. Now we've got split pins that run in here. Those places now, this should all slot in. It's going to take a little bit of fitting, but she'll go. I'll come back when it's time to put slide pins in. Split pins. We've already lubed the channel they live in. You want to make sure that the tabs go to the knuckle side and not the caliper side, otherwise you can't keep them in place. Hammer it through a little bit. Same thing with the bottom. Make sure the pins go to the latches go to the knuckle side. All right, slide pins are in. Last thing, and then we can put, well, then we got to bleed, but that's a two-person operation, so we'll need that in a second. Well, I may have to wait till this evening, but we've got a brake hose that needs reattached. It is a 15 millimeter. Now, these are banjo bolts. They're banjo washers for the banjo bolt. You always replace them when possible. Now this is a 15. So I need to go find my 15. All right, now one thing to do. All right. This is a flare nut wrench. You can use a regular box end, but I like a flare nut wrench for these. You should use a flare nut wrench for any of the brake line fittings. Now, I like to put a little bit of Never-Seez on these. I have seen way too many bleeders seize in place over the years. So that's how you do these. Passenger side's the same as driver's. I am going to run a lug nut down on this just to keep it in place while I bleed. I wish I had a pressure bleeder, but I don't, so I'm gonna have to go grab a friend and we'll bleed it out like that. Now, I'll do the other side, we'll come back when it's time to bleed, put the tires back on, and get this thing dropped down. So, brakes got bled off camera, and it is now time to get the tires on and mount it up. One thing that I will do next time is there's enough space on these to put a couple O-rings on to keep the hub attached to the rotor. That will be the plan for the next go around, just so they don't come off as the wheels come off. The other way you can do that is you can drill a hole through and use this hole and then countersink it and drill into the rotor itself, tap it, run a screw in. That's, you know, not necessary. Now, I know this is going to be a controversial piece, but I like a little bit of Never-Seez on my lug nuts. Now, some people are going to tell you that, you know, you shouldn't do that. It's going to screw with the torque. I put a couple little dabs on. But I've never had a lug nut stick when I did it this way. And while it might not be necessary down here in Pennsylvania or when I was out in Utah, you know, this is old habit from living up in the Rust country. And I will continue to do this until the day I die. It doesn't matter what I work on. And these are locks. Or there's, you know, a lock. Now, you know, how necessary that is, I don't know. I will probably swap the lug nuts out at some point. Now, I have the impact set on low. All I'm doing is using it to snug up the lug nuts. So we'll get her on the ground and we'll get the torque wrench out. Torque is 100 foot-pounds. Always torque in the star pattern. And then I always go around a second time. And that's it. We're done. Well, there we are. This saga on the Ranger is done. Now it's time for the next one. But if you got questions, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Drop the questions, comments down below. more than happy to help out. One thing that we will have to do is I got to take this in for an alignment on the front end, because we replaced those alignment bushings. I can tell just looking at it, it is not correct. So I will do that off camera. We'll get it aligned and go from there. Before that, though, probably is the next saga. Shouldn't take nearly as long as this one. We are doing the AC. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Sharps out.